Hey everyone, welcome back to the podcast. My guest today is Veronica Rottman. Veronica is a somatic practitioner, and this is a conversation that I'm really looking forward to having because I have not had somebody on the podcast in all these 4 years who has come on to talk about somatics, really, and how trauma manifests itself in our bodies. So,
Mm,
Veronica, welcome to the podcast and tell us all a little bit about you and why you do what you do.
yeah. Hi, Anna. Thanks so
Hi.
much for having me here.
Yeah.
I could talk about this all day, so I'm really excited to have an opportunity to
Yeah.
spread awareness. So I'm a somatic practitioner. My main area of focus is somatic experiencing, but I have a background of 15 years in lots of different body-based modalities. And yeah, somatic experiencing is a form of trauma resolution that emphasizes nervous system regulation. So in my work, I'm guiding mainly women, some men, to feel into trauma where it exists, which is in the body through sensations.
Okay. Yeah, and I was telling you before we started recording, I would see it when in my practice with patients who had gone into the emergency room because they thought they were having a heart attack. And it really was, the ER physician would say, you're not having a heart attack, you're having a panic attack. Or it would show up in, really terrible stomach problems. Irritable bowel syndrome, which is a syndrome, is a compilation of a lot of symptoms in the stomach and the gut, bloating, upset stomach, maybe even diarrhea. Oftentimes it's psychosomatic. It's they're somaticizing some sort of issue or unresolved issue into their body. So that's where you come in because this is something that you specialize in. So I would love to hear about, do you have clients who come to you or people who come to you who want to work on these issues of of physical pain, but really there's something psychological going on?
Absolutely. And they've actually changed it from psychosomatic to psychophysiological
Oh,
recently because
okay.
when we hear the word psychosomatic, what do we think? We think, oh, you're just making it up.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Like that's how that
Yes.
term has come to be understood when really we have the science now, and it's more recent science. This is like, last 20 years or so that we're finally realizing that when doctors were telling a lot of women, especially, oh, it's just psychosomatic, you're just
Mhm.
making this pain up.
It's all in
There's
your
a,
head.
exactly, it's all in your
Right.
head, or you're just
Right.
stressed out. Actually, the pain is very real, and a lot of it stems from trauma.
Yeah.
So when our nervous system has too much overwhelm in it, it will create these physical symptoms as a way to try to find balance. Actually, that might
Hmm.
sound confusing, but it's trying to do something with all of that overwhelm. And oftentimes it's trying to get our attention. So if we're stuck in a state of overwhelm because we have not processed the trauma, the energy imprint from that trauma is in our body, then it can lead to a whole host of different syndromes, we call them, skin issues,
Yeah.
gut issues,
Yeah.
hormonal issues. The list goes on and on. And we're often treating those from a medical perspective only. And there's a time and a place, of course, to see your medical doctor. That is not what I'm
Sure.
saying.
Sure.
But if you ever feel like you're just putting a band aid on the symptom, but it just keeps coming back. And generally, this is paired with a lot of stress, overwhelm, anxiety, depression, right? That
Yeah.
is a really good indicator that you really need to be working somatically to heal your trauma.
What kinds of clients come to you? What are some symptoms or issues that you're seeing in your practice?
Yeah, a lot of what you already named with gut issues, heart racing, but because I work primarily with women, a lot of them come to me with issues with pelvic floor dysfunction, pelvic
Mm.
pain, pain with sex.
Wow.
Because, yeah, we have a much higher rate, right, of boundary violations when it comes to that area of our body. And the body is really intelligent. It's like this
Yeah.
horrible thing happened to you before. So I'm going to create symptoms to keep any invasion, any potential touch or penetration. I'm going to
Keep you
keep that
away.
out.
Yes,
Exactly.
yes,
Yeah.
yes, yes, yes.
Yeah.
So, yeah, of course, I'm sure you've read Bessel Vander was
Hmm.
Vanderkolk's
Yep.
The Body Keeps a Score.
Yep. Yeah. About 12 years ago, I read that book, and I was in a place where I had not experienced enough of my own somatic trauma resolution. And I want to name that if anyone struggles to read that book, you're not alone. Like
Okay.
while it has pioneered the way for somatics to become part of the mainstream conversation, I'm so grateful for that. I'm really grateful that Bessel van der Kolk and his team are really revolutionizing our approach to healing
Hmm.
trauma, because they finally have research that shows that the vast majority of our issues, whether they're physical, emotional, mental,
Right.
stem from trauma. I also find that that book is really intense to read, particularly for trauma survivors, right? Because it
Okay.
really speaks to the truth about trauma. But if you're just reading a book, that's very cognitive.
Yeah.
And what do we need to do? We need to get into the body. So I just want to throw that out there, that if you're like,
Sure.
I actually can't get through this book, there's a good reason for that. Yeah.
And pay attention to that.
Mm-hmm.
Why you can't get through the book. Do you think the book is more for clinicians or for the layperson who's trying to understand their trauma?
Yeah, I don't think it's a good starting place for
Yeah.
people who are trying to heal trauma. I just don't. There are other books out there that I recommend. I
Yeah.
love Hillary McBride's work. I love Kimberly Ann Johnson, Rasma Menakin. Like, there's some really great authors out there that I think make this work more approachable and more body based.
Okay,
Peter
so don't
Levine
start
stuff.
there. Oh,
Yeah,
Peter Levine. I love Peter
yeah,
Levine. I went to
yeah.
I went to a conference with him. It's interesting. It was like the day before the world shut down in March of 2020. But he does really good work. And so that really moves into like polyvagal theory,
Yeah.
the vagus nerve, polyvagal. So can you talk a little bit about that? So, when we talk about trauma on the body, okay, so, but somebody could say, well, yeah, I have an upset stomach. I've been diagnosed with irritable bowel syndrome, but I don't know if there's any connect. I mean, yeah, I got trauma. You know what I mean? Like, I think a lot of people have maybe not always the big T traumas, but
Yeah.
most people have little T traumas.
Uh-huh.
How do people, and maybe you can share a little bit about your own backstory. How do you think, in your experience, people come to realize that what's going on in their body has something to do with their psychology or
Mm.
memories or past traumas?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think that um, we all have been waking up to the fact that, yes, there's this capital T trauma that, for the most part, involves really overwhelming, distinct experiences where there's like catastrophe, there's
Right.
really serious overwhelm going on in the system. But all the little T traumas, they add up over time.
Yeah.
And I don't know a single
Yeah.
person, I would love to meet this person if they exist, who had caregivers who raised them in a way where their emotional well being was being emphasized to the degree that it needs to be. So
Right.
no one was raised, with like the validation around what they're feeling. A lot of us were taught to like only express emotions that were palatable to our caregivers, and we
Yeah.
stifled the rest. And that in itself is a trauma to the body. Any emotion, especially when our nervous systems, when we're little, they're developing. And if we're constantly repressing emotions so that we can be, feel accepted by our family, like that over time is really going to create stress and trauma in the nervous system. Um, so yeah, and it's easy to go, well, but my parents, I had a roof over my head, I had everything I needed. But that one little element of having enough emotional support, attunement, right? That in itself can really wreak havoc on the system. So just
Yeah.
thinking about those more emotional based forms of experience and potential trauma is, I think, a good way to open up more curiosity around how our physical symptoms are manifestations of trauma. Yeah.
This is work that I would like to do personally. I have not done a lot of this work, and so I myself am interested in it. I did a post on social media last week, about having family meetings as a way to help deal with like fighting in the house with kids
Mm.
and in your family. And I talked about how, and we did do this. My husband and I did what we called chit chats. So we had a family
Yeah.
chit chat every week. And that, you know, it wasn't perfect. We didn't do it perfectly. The kids didn't always love doing it, but it was a time for everybody to air their grievances. And so I gave an idea and I bettered it. Like I bettered what my husband and I did with our 5 kids.
Yeah.
So do this, do that. We didn't do this and that will work better. And people don't know, but my sister follows me and I think she wrote on TikTok and she goes, we had great family meetings growing up when we were young. And I know it's her but other people wouldn't know it's my sister. I know it's her. And I was going to respond I think it was on TikTok and I didn't. I got off TikTok. And I texted her. I'm like, really? How old was I when we had those family meetings? I'm like, because I don't remember them. She's like, Anna! Exclamation point. She's like, I was joking. She's like, we didn't have any of those family meetings. She's like, all we had growing up was yelling at each other, yelling and screaming, you know. And you know, she was like, I'm sorry, I should have done that. I'm like, no, it was actually kind of funny.
Yeah.
But she's right. And so I think that like I don't have one big traumatic episode or a occurrence or event that happened in my life, but it was all those little T traumas of not feeling seen and well, not being seen and not being heard. And my parents were very busy, a lot of kids in my family. And my dad came home exhausted at night.
Yeah.
And it was the old school, wait till your dad gets home. My dad will walk in the door. My mom would tell my dad what so one of us did wrong, and my dad would yell at us. And there was a lot of
Mm.
yelling and frustration.
Mm.
Well, that was traumatizing for us little kids. I
Yeah.
just can't speak for, I have one of 8. I can't speak for my 7
Wow.
siblings. I can only speak for myself. But my sister making that comment, I mean, that was traumatizing for us. You weren't seen, you weren't heard. It was like, just be quiet. And so
Yeah.
I know that that affected me probably throughout my adult life in the way I am with other people. I've done a lot of psychotherapy, but
Hmm.
I haven't done this work. So, and a lot of meditation and
Hmm.
mindfulness. So I know now I'm in a much better place. But yeah, that affected me. It hardened me up. It made me tough. It made me competitive, um, inappropriately so at times. And
Oh yeah,
so, you know what I mean? So that's
I
how I
do.
think yeah. And it shows up like in a
Hmm.
tightness, like
Hmm.
my neck and shoulders are always up, you know, not so much today, but this is my adult years.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that is, I think you're reminding me of, you know, little T traumas for those who are listening. I'm sure many of you listening can think of something in your life where, yeah, I mean, or I was told that I would never get far or that I kind of sucked or there was addiction in the
Hmm.
family.
Hmm.
There was just a lack of communication. People didn't talk, you
Yeah.
know, like shove the feelings under the rug, make it go underground because we don't do that in this family.
Hmm.
Or
Hmm.
what I see in my practice is there's a big huge elephant in the family room, but let's just step over the elephant's toe and act like it's not there, but it's there. I mean, that's like low key trauma, right?
It really is because as kids, we're highly perceptive. We can feel things even if
Yes.
they're not being said, right? We're
Right.
always looking to our caregivers for safety and containment and attunement. And when that's not
Right.
being given and you can feel the tension in the room as a little kid, that is an overwhelming experience,
Yeah.
especially when it's happening over a long period of time. And
Yeah.
one other definition of trauma is, too little, not enough. So
Too
we
little, not
often hear
enough.
about like the overwhelm of too much, too fast, too soon, the experiences that replicate that imprint. That's trauma. But also too little and not enough is a form of
Oh,
trauma.
I
Yeah.
have never heard it said like that. Say it again. Could you
Too
repeat that?
little, too little and not enough. You're not getting enough of what you need or too little of it to feel safe. And especially as kids, but also in our adult relationships, if that's happening, that is a form of trauma. And
Yeah.
I think we're finally having this conversation around trauma, which is so great, but we tend to take it and like kind of, you know, take the pendulum and swing it really far in the other direction. So now there's kids who are saying that their backpacks on their back are too heavy and that's trauma. And so I think we have
Yeah.
to kind
Yeah.
of like keep it,
Yeah.
in check. But
I'm
what I
glad you
find
said
is,
that.
yeah,
Yeah.
What I
Yeah.
find is it's the opposite, is that most people, especially those of us who were raised by parents who were taught to only focus on like the material experience of life, like I go to work, I provide for my kids, and that's all I have to do, right? I think it's really hard for us. We're kind of in this, like, we're straddling two worlds where like we want to make a difference, and we, like, you're having these, weekly family chats with your kids, like that is massive, but we are also trying to heal from having been raised in a way where our
Right.
emotional well-being was not met. So for me
Right.
personally, it was a lot of trauma in my childhood. So I joke that I have a really high ACE score, which, if anyone, yeah, I know we're not supposed to joke about trauma, but okay, like, I feel like whoever said that didn't have a high ACE score.
Yeah.
Um, so ACE score, if for anyone out there who doesn't know, it stands for Adverse Childhood Experiences. And
Hmm.
there's lots of research done on kids who have high ACE scores and how it creates really high rates of physical distress,
Hmm.
symptoms, emotional and mental disorders, right? So a
Hmm.
lot of these disorders we're seeing stem from trauma.
Yeah.
Um, and for me, it manifested in really painful periods, really debilitating cramps from a
Oh,
young age. And I feel like that's not getting talked about as much. We hear about the gut health, we hear about, skin issues as being caused by trauma, but a lot of women, and now Harvard is finally researching this, are experiencing a lot of hormonal dysregulation that is being attributed to just hormones or stress. But guess what the stress
oh,
is? The stress is cortisol and adrenaline running over long periods of time because you still have trauma. Your body is still bracing against the present moment, going, oh, at any moment, we might get hurt again,
the
right?
brain
So
doesn't know. The brain just
it
goes
doesn't.
back to its old reactive mode.
Yeah. Yeah. And the body, the autonomic nervous system at all times, just a little tange here, a little tangent. Um, the autonomic nervous system, even as we talk, it's kind of like an inner surveillance system. And it's scanning externally through the senses for signs of safety or signs of danger. It's also doing this internally, reading the sensations and the emotions we're having. And its job is to protect us from potential threat. Now, if we've had experiences in the past that were overwhelming or that too little, not enough over time, the body, the autonomic nervous system takes a snapshot of what was happening in those moments externally, sounds, sights, smells, tone of voice, facial expressions,
Yes.
and internally. What was I feeling? Was it grief? Was it shame? Was it fear? Was it anger? And anytime, if we don't process that experience in the future, anytime that our nervous system detects, oh, there's that facial expression, that means you're about to get yelled at. Or, you know,
Oh,
then it goes, oh, it's happening again. And this is why, and this is all happening on a precognitive level. My brain can't even be aware of it happening as it's happening. It takes a little time for my brain to go, oh, I'm off here. I'm feeling anxious. I'm feeling disconnected from everyone around me, whatever it is. And oftentimes, when we're triggered, what do? We shame and blame others or ourselves
or ourselves.
when actually our body is just projecting something from the past onto the present. So I just want to put it out there that if you've ever felt like, why do I have such intense reactions to such trivial things? Why do I feel like I'm constantly being triggered and like everyone around me is just can't get it right? Right? It takes turning inward towards the body to feel that and digest it and show your nervous system that what was happening before is not happening
Right.
anymore, right?
How do you start? I mean, how did you start to do this work?
Mm,
How did
yeah,
you even get into this?
yeah. So I always actually go way back to my childhood because at the same time that I had a lot of chaos and overwhelm in my environment, I was raised with holistic health
Mm,
as the way. So yoga, meditation,
okay.
nature. My mom loved talking about her birth story. So eventually I become a birth doula.
Right.
And so I always had this reverence and this relationship with my body, especially as a woman, that I didn't see my peers having. And so,
Mm.
I go on to have lots of emotional, relational, physical symptoms, but also I'm kind of like you, Anna. I'm a high achiever. I'm like, I've got to perfect life because if
Right.
I do that, then everyone will love me. Right.
Right.
But
Right.
inside, I was hurting. Right.
Yeah.
Um, and then I graduated college, and straight out of there, I became a yoga teacher. So a lot of those body based modalities were starting to really open up more capacity in my nervous system while making me feel sensations that I had been avoiding to feel. I had been avoiding feeling for a long time because it's painful, and our
Yeah.
autonomic nervous system will actually cause us to dissociate from our body
To
when it's
protect us as a
exactly.
protective mechanism,
Yeah. And then you
the
have our
dissociation.
cultural
Yeah.
our cultural system that says ignore your body, push
Right.
through, make your body appear a certain way,
That's
but
the
don't.
American way. That's
Yeah,
really the American way too,
it
right?
really
It's
is.
our
It
messaging, our social messaging.
yes,
Yeah.
we learn it from a very young age.
Right.
So, when I started seeing a Jungian analyst, and when
Mm.
she took me into my body, that's when I went, oh, this is what I should be doing. Like something lit
Wow.
up in me. And what's so fascinating, Anna, is that when I was in college, I had a boyfriend at the time, and I told him we were fighting, and when you're young, and
Right.
yeah, and I told him I just know, and I don't know why. I was like, I just know that our bodies are the reason we get into these fights, and the
Oh.
reason we have issues. And he sort of looked at me like I was crazy, but I was like, I'm going to write a book on this one day. Just wait.
Yeah.
And then sure enough, I go on and I start studying somatic experiencing, and we have the science to confirm it. Um, so that was really validating. And my life has changed drastically, Anna. So as a yoga teacher, birth worker, I was working so hard, and I never really felt like I could get to where I wanted to be. I always felt like I would get close, but something would happen. I was broke all the time. I was, in and out of relationships. And once I started doing this work, especially in relationship to my menstrual cycle, which a lot of my symptoms came through there, life changed drastically. Like I now run a
Really?
business, I make six figures. I have a really wonderful family, and my kids do fight too, by the way.
Yeah.
We should talk after this because I
Yeah.
don't know. Oh, it's overwhelming.
Sometimes yeah. I mean, you said something earlier that reminded me of those days with the kids being at home. And even like you made a really good point about, and I don't like to think that my kids have small T traumas. And at the same time, I'm realistic that they probably do. I mean, I
Yeah.
went through a divorce. Their father is we're both a second marriage and we're a blended family. And that's when we started doing the chit chats. And, I'm sure well, I know because one of the jobs I knew that I had, and I really knew this because of my profession, was to listen to them when they would talk to me about if they had issues. And I'm telling you, they all have spoken about it now. There's five of them. They're all in their mid to late 20s. Some of them did it when they were in their tween years and the teen years. The boys talked about it. The girls talked about it earlier. The boys talked about it more as of late in the last couple of years,
Mm,
how their parents' divorces affected them and how
yeah.
difficult it was to come together as a blended family. And part of me wanted to run from it. Part of me was
Right.
like, oh God, I don't want to hear
That's
this because
painful.
it's hard to hear because it's looking at your own blind spots of how you didn't do it great. You screwed, in air quotes, screwed up is the messaging I would tell myself because I
Mm,
got divorced from their father and my now husband divorced their mother. And the guilt and the shame around that. So you're dealing with all your own stuff. I'm in my own therapy, but I also knew, Anna, you have to be there for those kids who've also been traumatized by all of this. There's a lot of guilt around that as a mom. Like, okay, really, I'm
yeah.
admitting that I've traumatized my kids. I knew
Mm,
I needed to sit and I need to make myself emotionally available to them and to listen. And
yes.
then I needed to, if I had issues around that, don't nod your head and say no. Don't say that's not how it was. Don't get defensive. Well, this is why this and this is why that. Sit and listen to it, get comfortable being uncomfortable, and go take that back to your own therapist and talk about it in your own therapy,
Yes, yes,
right? But you got
yes.
to sit there in the kitchen and you got to listen to those kids when they're talking to you or they're crying. I mean, I'm telling
Mm,
you, like, we just had one of our boys, it was probably 2 years ago, Christmas, talked about how the divorce affected him. And now it wasn't so much me, it was more my husband. He's like, and I'll never forget my husband sitting on the ground by the fireplace, just going, whoa,
yeah.
taking big sighs, going, whoa, whoa. And I'm like, well,
Mm,
because I'm like, well, Tim, it's your turn. It's not kind of your turn, but the boys are late bloomers with all of this.
yes,
It's harder for them,
it
but
is.
we're listening to their trauma. So I think that this is a really important conversation around trauma, how it shows up. And for those who can speak it, wonderful. But at the same time, listen to what's going on in your body because I still need to do it. I'm still working
Yeah.
on it, right?
Yeah, it takes time. It takes consistency, and like anything, having someone who can guide you through it is
Right.
essential. So, like right now, our bodies, our nervous systems, on a subconscious, precognitive level, are communicating.
Yeah.
So, there's biorhythms of co-regulation that ideally are available in relationships. And if we don't have someone who can offer that while we're filling into our body, if we don't have someone who can offer co-regulation, and ideally they're in their own body, right, it's really hard to do this work. So it's very trendy
Okay.
right now to log on social media and you see like, do this somatic practice to heal your nervous system. This
Yes.
drives us somatic practitioners crazy
I bet it
because
does. I bet.
I wish it could be that simple. I wish it was just shake and you'll be better, but that's not it. We need the container. We need safety in relationship and a trained professional to
Right.
help you heal your trauma. And we're such a hyper individualistic society, so it's really easy to go, and especially when you have trauma, to go, I have to do this all myself. And
Yeah.
I want to go back to what you said about being a mother, because I think that as mothers we are so quick to just take on the guilt.
Yeah.
We take on the guilt and
Mm-hmm.
we go, okay, that was my fault. That was my fault. Leave
Mm-hmm.
your poor mothers alone.
Mm-hmm.
Really, I'm not saying that mothers are perfect. My mom was far from it.
Right.
But we can realize that your trauma is your trauma, and yes, communicate with your parents. But um, I love, it's just such a gift to hear what you gave them,
Mm.
because repair is on a biological level so healing when we've had
Yeah.
ruptures. So those repairs, there's so much that we can renegotiate in our system when we make them, when we're willing to. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and thank you for that. What I have also realized in the work that I have done on myself is that, you know, I hear this go back and forth. My mom has said it, and I know that like my aunts and the elders above me had said, we did the best we could. We did the best we could. Stop it. We did the best we could. And I was in my 20s, and maybe when I was in graduate school and doing all this work and doing loving and excited about my newfound psychological knowledge, I'm like, well, that's not good enough. It's not good enough to say, you did the best you could, because sometimes it felt like a pat, just stop talking about it, like this pat answer or an excuse. And but now here I am in my mid 50s. I'm a mother. I've been a mother myself, and I think, well, I do think at the time she really did do the best she could, because my
Mm,
mother had her own traumas,
right.
and she came into being a mother and wanted all of us kids with the information and the knowledge she had. They weren't reading
Mm,
parenting magazines, whatever it is. I mean, I could spend all day long doing
right.
the shame and blame game, but she did the best she could, because look at how she was raised. She grew up so poor. So I could go on about that. But tell me a little bit more about, like, for someone like me, what would someone like me, let's say I come to you, because there's probably many people who are out there listening, like, well, I have that too, Anna. Like, that's the way I was raised. I got a mom who was narcissistic or never available. My dad was an alcoholic. No one
Mm,
ever talked. I was horribly bullied by one of my siblings, and my parents ignored it because they were so stressed out because there was a sick sibling, and they had to pay all the attention to my brother who was sick. Do you know what I'm saying? Like all these stories. So I come to you. What is it that you're going to do with me or somebody like me? How do you
Yeah,
start?
yeah. We always start with resourcing, somatic
Mm,
resourcing. So instead of feeling into the charge right away, which in a system that has trauma in it, we are going to naturally fixate on the sensations or the emotions that don't feel pleasant. We're going to go towards the
okay.
activation because our system is more familiar with that. It's what's been familiar for a long time. So we want to interrupt that and help your system orient to what's called your counter vortex. We all have the trauma vortex, which is
Mm-hmm.
all the trauma we've experienced that's in our body. There's all that charge, that bracing, right? And the counter vortex is the opposite of that. It's the physiological part of our nervous system that was not impacted by the trauma, that is
Okay.
already oriented towards healing, growth, expansion, regulation. And this exists intrinsically within us, within our physiology, no matter what we have endured. It's
Oh,
always
that's
there.
cool. That's cool.
Yeah. So
It's
I
cool
am
to think about.
guiding,
I like that. Yeah.
yeah, there's a lot of hope there, I think. And
Yeah.
I am guiding people to connect to that through resources. So I know when I look outside at the trees, our eyes are a huge part of our sensory system, a huge part of our nervous system, taking in information all the time. If we intentionally look at something we enjoy looking at, this can signal to the nervous system we are safe.
Oh,
So right now, when I look at the trees, I feel my feet, they feel warm and tingly. That sensation is a biomarker, a somatic marker of me feeling that counter vortex that says to my nervous system, what happened in the past is not happening right now. And we need that, more of that, before we can have the safety in our nervous system to process and digest the charge. If I go
wow.
straight to the
Okay.
charge, and this happens in talk therapy, which I love, by the way, we might be reiterating the same stories over and over and over again. And there can be a lot of shift with finally vocalizing,
Yeah.
getting it out. But if you've ever felt like, but now I'm plateauing, why am I plateauing in talk therapy? It's because you have to get into the stories your nervous system is trying to tell. But if we do that without safety in our nervous system, it's going to cause us to feel more overwhelmed. So we always start with
Okay.
counter vortex. Yeah.
That's so cool. So I was going to say, for if I'm going to see a somatic practitioner and I have an appointment for a Wednesday at 7 p.m. after work or after dinner, and I come to your office or maybe I'm doing it on Zoom or online. I don't know how to start with you because I think I have some trauma from my childhood or from my teenage years, but right now it's just I just got home from work. Do you know what I'm
Mm-hmm.
saying? Like I'm
Mm-hmm.
like to help the potential client think about how does she do this? Like how do we go there? You know?
Yeah. What's really beautiful about this work, one of the many things, is that you don't have to talk about your trauma.
Mm,
So it's all there. The implicit memories versus the
yeah.
explicit memories in our mind are in our body. And we can simply go in and relate to the body, feel the sensations, talk about the sensations, and the body will show us what needs to be processed.
Will
Um,
it really? Will it? It
yes,
really does.
it really does. And I'm always resonating. So I'm in my body and I'm going, what's happening in Anna's nervous system that I can feel in my body, right?
Are you an empath?
I am. So
I got. I mean, I kind of knew.
yeah, you can
An
tell.
empath. That's amazing because you can pick up because that's what I think that's what makes us good therapists because like I'm a total empath. Like I can totally like it. I've had to have boundaries around that throughout my profession and
Same.
yeah, my
Yeah.
personal life. Like I've had to work on having boundaries with people because I can completely go there. That's why in my practice, I have to really watch how many trauma clients I would take on as a
Oh
trauma
yeah,
specialist myself, but I do different work than you. So that's why I'm thinking like this is a wonderful adjunct to what I do because I
it
do the
is.
talk therapy. I'm not EMDR trained, and that's another modality for
Hmm.
trauma treatment, but so I
Hmm.
refer to it for EMDR. But I will do more of the wearing the memory out, the talk therapy.
Hmm.
That's a mode of therapy for trauma. But you make a good point because at some point you could wear the memory out. It's not working anymore. And you still have these memories, and still showing up in your everyday life in certain ways.
Yeah.
And I think more of this with people with big T traumas like post traumatic stress disorder.
Hmm.
So that might be for me where I would say, hey, listen, you might now want to go see a somatic practitioner because I want you
Right.
to do the body work.
Yes. And I think that
Yes.
the psychotherapy piece, according to Stephen Porges, right, we have 20% of information going from brain to body, but now we know
Yeah.
that 80% then is communicating from the body up. So it's
Yeah.
kind of like we need that 20%, especially if we do have capital T trauma, to be reframed and worked with. And that tends to create a lot more safety in doing the somatics. But I've had plenty of people who don't have any talk therapy and make really big shifts within their system.
And they just
Um,
come in. Okay. And
yes,
because
yes,
they could start with you or someone like yourself.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
of course, if you're dealing with particular forms of trauma or personality disorders, that's where I might have a team. Like it's
Right.
me, it's also your
Right.
therapist, it's,
Right.
maybe a psychiatrist, and we're all working together to help you. Yeah.
I would think that somebody with specifically borderline personality features
Mm-hmm.
or borderline personality disorder would do really well with this somatic work to help to
Yes,
regulate, self-regulate, those emotions when they feel flooded and overwhelmed and just it's all coming up for them, right?
absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they have a lot of
yeah.
trauma. Yeah.
Lots of trauma. And I think there's a lot of like um compassion
Mhm.
now that we have this nervous
Completely.
system lens, because it's like a lot of people were given these diagnoses and it's like, oh, you just have something wrong with you, when
Yep.
really it's like they have a lot of trauma, or their parents, there's intergenerational trauma that from their
Yes.
grandparents and great grandparents, right? So we're really starting to see how much trauma is not just PTSD. There's much more of it. And also, wearing a heavy backpack is not a trauma. Sorry, kids.
Right. Yeah, I know, right?
Yeah.
I know. And I think we need to clarify too, and I say this
Yeah.
with throwing all kinds of grace and compassion. I don't like to use these labels. It only helps me sometimes to understand how to treat if I see something like borderline features or narcissistic features. It's like less than 2% of the population has narcissistic personality disorder. It's really not a common diagnosis.
But we're using that term everywhere.
All the time, every day, you hear it
Mm,
all over social media, and it drives us crazy, right? All of us, because we're like, you don't really know what you're talking about,
no.
and it's okay. Many of us are narcissistic from
Yeah.
time to time, and
Yeah.
that's okay. That's actually kind of a sign of a healthy ego. You just got to keep it in check. But, I remember when I was in graduate school, I've said it on the podcast here before, and I was learning about all the different personality disorders. I thought I had all of them,
Right. Oh, as
avoidant,
an empath.
dependent.
Yeah.
Yes, yes, yes. Narcissistic,
Right.
borderline. I remember saying to a friend of mine who was a colleague, and she's years ahead of me, and her father was a psychiatrist. She was a therapist, and I said, Beth, I think I have a narcissistic personality disorder. She said, I'll never forget. She was Anna. The fact that you're saying that to me right
Right.
now
Right.
tells me you don't have a narcissistic personality disorder because narcissists would never wonder about it.
Nope. They would have zero awareness.
Yes, and they would never go to therapy or see
No.
someone like you unless their business is being destroyed or they're getting
Yeah.
divorced or they're being
Right.
threatened
Right.
in some kind of way. Yeah, yeah. So
Yeah. Yeah.
I did want to say that though because I think that um, I don't like using the labels, but at the same time, it does help. I've had clients who've come to me and they've said, I'm a borderline. And they seem to be helped by it because they can go and read about it themselves. So they know, which is kind of cool, they know what treatments might work best for them. Like, you're this type of therapist, you could help me with this, or I need to do something with my body because I don't know what to do with the anger and the rage I feel on the inside. I need help with that because I know that I have dysregulation issues.
Yeah, and the anger wants to be moved. If we think about emotion itself, it has the word motion in it, and then the E,
Yeah.
it stands for energy. So energy wants to be put into motion. So a lot of,
Right.
especially repeating themes in your emotional self, whether it's anger or fear or grief or
Hmm.
whatever it is, shame, that is a loop in the body. There's a trauma loop
Yep.
happening because there was a time in the past where your body wanted to push or it wanted to kick or bite because it was
Yeah.
that angry. And if we
Yeah.
don't get to complete those incomplete self
There you
protection
go.
responses,
Yeah.
they stay stuck on a loop trying to complete, and they show up as I'm angry all the time, I'm irritated all the time, or I'm scared of everything, I'm anxious all the time, right? So thinking and relating to how we
Yeah.
are animals, and animals,
Yeah.
what do when they express self protection, right? They roar, they
Yeah.
bare their teeth. We have that
But
impulse too.
us, and then you get told as a child to be quiet, to stop that right now. Oh, it's we get dismissed. It's not that big of a deal. Calm down. Patronized, dismissed, diminished, minimized. Where does that go? It goes underground. And so it just keeps happening. And then that's that loop, right? And then when you do
Absolutely.
it and you do it as an adult or a teenager, and now you're going into the adult years, and if you're doing that in public, you don't have friends, coworkers step away from you.
Yeah,
It shows up in all the different aspects of your life.
absolutely. Yeah. And
Yeah.
what I love about this work is it really opened up a lot of self compassion for me because I was like, oh, my nervous system is responding as it should,
Right.
right? Like my nervous system, there's nothing broken or wrong with me. My body is responding as it should to trauma and to the world we live in. I'm not broken, right?
Right. Not at all. Yeah.
Because it can start to feel like those patterns are a sign that you're wrong, you're inherently unworthy, or,
Totally.
whatever.
Yes. There's
Yeah.
something just fundamentally wrong with you, and we got to, everybody deserves to change that messaging inside of them.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yes. Oh,
absolutely.
I feel that right here when you
Yeah.
say that, right in my chest. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Everyone
Oh,
deserves that.
I
Hmm.
love that. I love that you just said that too.
Hmm.
Okay. So Veronica, I mean, this is so interesting to me because this is the new wave. It's not new, but it's the next wave. And I think
Yeah.
that, this is something for those who are listening, if they want to if they're curious about this work, if they want to know more, how could they find you or how could they find someone who practices this maybe in their city or their town?
Yeah, so you can head to my website at waking-womb.com. I also have an Instagram where I'm very active. I share a lot of
Okay.
nervous system education. It's just Waking Womb. But also, you can find somatic practitioners all over the world. I highly recommend somatic experiencing practitioners because,
Okay.
yeah, I'm biased, but it's a
Okay.
highly effective form of somatic trauma resolution, and that's why it's so world renowned. So if you Google somatic experiencing practitioner, you will find lots of people and lots of different modalities that are being integrated into it. So like I have my background in yoga and holistic pelvic care and Reiki. Some people are massage therapists, some people are therapists,
Hmm.
psychotherapists, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So finding the right fit is great. I also have a 10-week online immersion called Soma School coming up, which centers the unique architecture of the female nervous system. So it's for
Mm.
women. And we're looking at all of the stages of our embodied experience of life. So reproductive years, perimenopause, menopause, our pelvic health, and how nervous system regulation plays a fundamental role to us thriving in these phases of our lives. And we do get a little woo. We get into the female archetypes and the inner seasons. And yeah, you can find that on my website.
Okay. And then I also saw, I think I was on, was it your website or Instagram, your retreats that you
Yes, yeah,
have and
yeah.
that are coming up. Can you talk a little bit about those? They
I
look
would
so
love to.
relaxing. Yeah.
They have been so wonderful. So my best friend is also a yoga teacher and in SE, and this will be our third Soma yoga retreat. We're going to Green Rock.
Wow.
It's this gorgeous retreat center in Bend, Oregon.
Okay.
For
Mm.
it's in the fall, and we get 3 meals a day. So we have an incredible chef who provides organic, farm to table meals, daily somatic yoga, and then I teach the somatic classes. So we
Okay.
get into the nervous system, and you really walk out feeling completely rejuvenated. We've gotten
Mm.
so much good feedback, and I myself, as a facilitator, have experienced how expansive these retreats are, and I'm facilitating. So it's,
Wow.
I'm
Yeah.
working, and I still come home and I am like a whole new woman. So
Okay.
you can read more about that. We have 2 spots left. So yeah, you can head to
Okay.
my website to grab those if you are curious. Yeah.
And make your plans for next fall to go out to Bend, Oregon, because I think that that would
Yeah.
be a wonderful experience. It's time to take care of yourself, to get away, and to start to heal those traumas in the body.
It
Yeah.
is time. Thank you,
Okay.
Anna.
Yeah, Veronica, thank you so much for this. I mean, this is we don't have enough time to talk about all the things.
Hmm.
But if you are interested in working with Veronica, the information will all be in the show notes, and go and check her out, read more about her. And if you can work with Veronica, or you can go on this retreat, I think that's a gift you're giving to yourself, to start to move into a place of peace and contentment.
It really is. It's
Yeah.
life-changing work. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it is. Okay. Thanks for coming on.
Yes. Thank you so much,
Okay.
Anna.